Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books. If you have been here before, you see we've got a new angle because the bookcase is now in my niece's room and it's not easy to film in front of. There's a lot of things being moved around in this house. We recently got new carpets, hence the room has now been moved back. Turn it into more of an adult room. I am 34, but also things are happening in regards to the flat house hunt thing. So yeah, don't think it's going to be long. Fingers crossed. So today I have got a dystopia book for you, and this book is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. Yeah, that's your front cover, all very dark and mysterious. And yeah, this book was shortlisted for the National Book Award for Translated Literature in 2020. I believe this was actually written in the 90s. And it's in crime, thriller, literary fiction and psychological fiction, but it is very much a dystopia, and you'll understand that once you hear the blurb if you haven't already heard of this book. I've heard about this book on and off since 2020 of people reading it and like dissecting this book, and since it was translated basically, and I thought that sounds really interesting. And I want to give it a go and see what I think, because there's been very mixed thoughts over this book, so I just thought I'd like to read it for myself and see what it evokes in me. So I'm going to read that blurb to you and then I'll go through my thoughts on this fascinating book. Hat, ribbon, bird, rose. To the people on the island, a disappeared thing no longer has any meaning. It could be burned in the garden, thrown in the river, or handed over to the memory police. Soon enough, the island forgets it ever existed. When a young novelist discovers that her editor is in the danger of being taken away by the memory police, she desperately wants to save him. For some reason, he doesn't forget, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for him to hide his memories. Who knows what will vanish next? Yeah, so this was originally Japanese author. It was originally written in Japanese, and then it was translated into English. From the looks of things, in 2020, that was when it got all the awards. So it was shortlisted for the National Book Award for Translated Literature in 2020, it was shortlisted for the Ned Kelly Awards in 2020, and also winner of the Booker International Prize in 2020. It seems that once it was translated, it kind of just blew up overnight. The book was originally published in January of 1994. And when you Google it, it puts it into science fiction, dystopia, fantasy, and psychological fiction. This book was kind of fascinating and really sad. I found it to be quite a sad book when you really get into like what it's about. Where to start with this? You're basically looking at three main characters and you're seeing the point of view of a woman who writes books. It's never specifically stated her name, where this is actually happening, and because it's just referred to as the island, you don't get the writer's name anywhere in the book. You also see her editor, who she refers to as R, and then an old man that she is friends with, who is literally referred to as the old man. There are other people referred to by like names and surnames, but those three main people who we are essentially looking at their part in this period of time, you don't get actual names for them. Well, but I must admit, at the very beginning of the book, even though it's obvious that it's been going on for a while with the memory police and things being disappeared, at the beginning of the book, birds disappear. And I don't know why, but my brain hooked onto that, and so when we were then introduced to R, my brain went to, oh, is his name Robin? I don't know why my brain did that. It went from missing birds to R, and my brain tried to connect the dots by thinking, oh, maybe his name was Robin, but because now the birds are missing, they just refer to him as R. I don't know why my brain did that, but my brain did that. What's interesting about this book is there's never actually an explanation for anything, which I can understand how that could be frustrating for some people. Some people will go into a book wanting answers, especially in regards to a dystopia, and you don't really get the answer. Your brain is left to fill in the gaps. You are literally looking into a window in this book of a period of time, and you're just observing what happened. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop it. There's no explanation as to why it's happening. It's a case of you're just watching it happen. And I think that's part of what made this book so scary and so sad and so unnerving. Especially because even though it's done from the point of view of the female novelist, you most identify with R, the editor, who can remember everything. Because as things are being forgotten, the narrator is observing that thing that's been disappearing. If that makes any sense, because it's referred to as something being disappeared in the book. So, like, if a person disappears, they've disappeared. If an object, like a book, or, like, the birds have disappeared, they say, oh, it's been disappeared. You know, it's, yeah. I finished this last night in bed. I think it took me about 2 days to read this, and it really got inside my head. It was really weird, but I think dystopia has a way of doing that. And also, because I've been reading 1984, the George Orwell book, at the same time I've been reading this, I have very much seen that Orwellian influence in this book, and seeing how, like, the memory police in 1984, the slight similarities. And I know there have been other dystopias that the memory police has been compared to, and it's obviously been heavily influenced by other dystopias, but it also has its own little moment, if that makes any sense, of being its own entity, if you will. But yeah, because as you go through, even though there isn't an explanation, and you're never told explicitly why things are happening, I felt like my brain was trying to fill in the gaps. It was just like, oh, maybe they did this because of this. Because it's obvious that the memory police don't want people to remember. Like, when something is disappeared, if it's something physical they can touch, the person is compelled to go and burn that object. So, when photographs are disappeared, they feel compelled to burn the photographs that they have in their house. And they also know that if they keep the photographs, the memory police will be on them. So it's kind of it's a weird thing where even though they're compelled to do it, they also the consequences if they don't. And at the same time, when they look at a photo, it no longer provokes a reaction from them. So they can look at a photograph and go, that means absolutely nothing to me. There's no emotional response. I have no connection to this thing anymore. So originally it was obviously at the beginning you see it with the birds, where they're looking over and saying, oh, what is that weird flying thing in the sky? Obviously they can't kill the birds. They can't burn the birds. The birds just disappear. When it comes to the point when it seems like they've cancelled, like, all the calendars and everything, and then suddenly they're stuck in an eternal winter, it's just like, it's fascinating, but also because you're not getting the backstory, you're just thinking, how are they doing it? It would be incredibly interesting if there was another book to see it from the point of view of somebody who could remember, like, art, or even from somebody, like, within the memory police, even, like, the origins of it, because, as I said, it gives you nothing. It gives you absolutely nothing in regards to why it's happening, how they're doing it. You're just witnessing this young woman and her life over a certain amount of time while it's all happening, leading up to the end. I say end loosely because how it ends it doesn't end well. And when I finished it and put it down, it really did invoke quite a weird response from me, because I think I just sat there, because I finished it in bed, I just sat in bed just thinking almost about nothing. It was just like my brain was just trying to understand what I'd read, and I felt quite emotional at the end of it because I was just realising just how sad it was. Because another of the part of the story is the fact that the young female writer, when she finds out that her editor can remember and cannot forget, she decides to help him and protect him. So she creates, there's a hidden room in the house that she lives in, under the floorboards, and so she and the old man get this room for R to hide out in, where she goes down, she brings food down for him, she creates a system in her house where she can talk to him through like pipes and things. And yeah, because it's never explicitly stated like a date of when this is set. It just, you know, like, is this in the future, is this in the past, is this in the present? We have no idea. But yeah, and then as certain things went out throughout the story, I'm trying not to say too much about what disappears because it would probably give away the ending, but there comes a point when, how do I say this without saying it, things that you didn't think could be disappeared are disappeared, and you realise that it's getting harder for people who can remember to fake that they can't remember it. And so when more extreme things are disappeared, I started to think, is this the Memory Police's way of identifying the people who are faking it? Other people who have read this book maybe will be able to identify what I'm talking about by that. But if you haven't, I will say it's an incredibly weird, I mean, it's already a weird book, but it is a very incredibly weird and important part of the story when a certain thing goes missing and you realise that the people who can remember cannot fake that. They can't fake that they can't remember it because it affects their whole being. It got to the point when I was just there thinking, is this a more extreme way for the Memory Police to identify the people who can remember, while at the same time stripping away more rights and people's entire humanity? But at the end, when what happens, and you're just there going, what does the Memory Police get out of it? Has it been some kind of social experiment gone completely wrong? Yeah, it does leave you with more questions than answers, but I kind of like that it made me think like that. And I think with a dystopia, I think most dystopias do that. They put the questions in. It's like even reading 1984, I had a conversation with my mum about it the other day, because my mum can't remember if she actually read it at school, and I was saying, you know, because I was getting to the point in 1984 when they're talking about like language and how they're trying to make it more simple and they're removing words from the dictionary, and I was saying we're at a point when we've gone in the completely opposite direction, when we are adding more words to the dictionary because of things that have come out like with technology and stuff. But at the same time, we've also pounced on things from 1984, like the idea of Big Brother, turning that into a television show with a whole thing with like Room 101 and everything. And yeah, I just find dystopias completely fascinating, but at the same time absolutely terrifying, and the concept of anything like that becoming real. But the thing with this book, with the Memory Police, is the fact that, as I've repeatedly said, it never identifies what the time in which it's set. It's not explicitly stated where it's set. Even if it was originally written in Japanese, that doesn't mean it was necessarily set in Japan. And then there's also the fact that the only person really you can identify with is R, because at least that gives some kind of resemblance of a name there. Whereas with the novel writer who you're following and the old man, even though you do feel a bit of a connection to them, they have been reduced to no name, to no person. It feels very intentional, the way that this was written. Like, the author had something very specific in mind when they wrote this book, and it is fascinating. This is the kind of book that I probably would have had so much fun really getting into and writing essays about. I love that side of it. I love the research and figuring stuff out like that, and doing the comparisons to other dystopias and other books. Yeah. I just found it completely fascinating, and when I got to the end of the book, it really, like, I felt like I was, like, holding my heart, because it was just like, I don't know how to feel about the end of this book, even though I just felt like it was incredibly sad the way it ended. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. It was such a powerful book. To say I enjoyed it, I'm not sure if that's the right word for it, but I feel like this is a book I could reread and possibly see more stuff in there. It's sometimes like when you go back and watch, like, I know this is a completely different comparison, but when there's so much packed into something quite small, you always feel like there's more to it. and that you can reread it. It's like me watching Victoria Wood's Dinner Ladies. She packed so much into a 30-minute episode that I can still watch it and find new things to laugh at. And it feels weird to compare a comedy series to a book like this, but it's got a similar premise because it's a short book and it's crammed in so much to the point that if I read it again, I'd probably find something new to focus on, and I'd be able to probably read between more lines and maybe catch on to something else that I didn't see when I originally read it. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant, powerful, ultimately sad story. The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. It doesn't have all the answers, and you need to be prepared for that when you read it, because if you're a person who wants answers, you're not going to get it. This is a book where you're let into a window of time where you're observing these three people and the stories that are happening around them, and there's no explanation, and there's no way to stop it. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time with another video. Stay safe, everybody. Mwah.